You're listening to Honestly Mental, the podcast, and I'm your host, Erika Diaz. I'm a wife, a mama, a woman in leadership, but y'all, I'm a perfectly imperfect human. I have depression, PTSD, and generalized anxiety disorder, and I am figuring it out every single day. It's really been quite the journey, so this podcast aims to provide a raw and authentic approach to several issues surrounding mental health. Through the lens of our guests and I, we will provide insight into how we navigated our own challenges through honest and vulnerable conversation. We are building a community of individuals committed to changing the world one conversation, one person at a time. We are raising awareness by destigmatizing mental health through continuing the conversation. We are providing hope and ultimately have a goal of saving the lives of those who may be feeling dark and alone. Hello, hello, hello. Thank you for joining another episode. And this week you are in for a treat. I recently had the opportunity to speak at American Staffing Association's Thrive virtual event, and I spoke about how work became my identity and then it broke me. Now, I know you already know part of the story from previous episodes, but I thought it would be wise to walk you through how my identity became enmeshed in my work persona and then ultimately led to my mental health crisis last year when I entered the partial hospitalization program. So as you already know, I'm a wife, a mama of 2 boys, Jude, who is 11, Oliver, who is 3. He'll be 4 here later on this month. And I'm a woman in leadership, creator of this podcast, and most recently a founder and CEO of Strategenius Consulting, which is the new business that I launched in May. Because the evolution of my identity becoming completely ingrained in work didn't happen overnight, I'm going to take you on a journey all the way back to my first job when I was just 14 years old, and it was the summer between 8th and 9th grade, and I was an ice cream scooper and waffle cone maker at Roaring 20s Ice Cream Parlor. Now, there's a bit of an odd story here involving a squirrel, but I promise it will make sense, so just bear with me. So this was a job that I absolutely loved. As you can imagine, getting free ice cream every shift wasn't something that I could say no to. So as a 14-year-old, this job was perfect for me. And honestly, I wouldn't say no to ice cream nowadays either. But anyway, so one day I had arrived to work, and upon my arrival, there happened to be a squirrel that was near the door, and it was no longer alive. This was my first job, so I was eager beaver and volunteered to take care of the squirrel problem. So I walked myself across the street to a lumber company to ask to borrow a shovel, which I did. I came back, I took care of the squirrel situation, and went about my shift, which was normal up until the end of my shift when I was approached by my boss and the owner of the ice cream parlor that she was disappointed in me. She was disappointed because she had received feedback that I was rude and disrespectful during the exchange asking for a shovel. And I just couldn't believe it. I was beside myself. First of all, the interaction was relatively short, right? And I just didn't envision myself being somebody who is rude or disrespectful when asking for a shovel. So nonetheless, I am somebody who holds themselves to a very high standard. I accepted responsibility and said that I would apologize. So her and I walked back across the street. I began apologizing to the gentleman, and he actually ended up interrupting me and saying, he appreciated the sentiment, but he didn't really know what I was talking about. He shared that, in fact, I was kind and polite. He didn't think that an apology was necessary, and he wasn't really certain where it came from. So there was a lot of confusion around the conversation and the apology. But at the end of the day, I couldn't have asked for a better outcome. My boss was right there, so she heard firsthand that there wasn't anything that I did wrong, which is all I could have asked for in that scenario. So walking back, I learned that she was informed of my behavior by two of my coworkers. Now, look, I will never understand why they did that. And so I've moved beyond that. But this was really my first interaction of a scenario where I took ownership for something that wasn't mine to own. In addition to that, it was my first interaction where there were others that were seemingly trying to derail my career. And I hadn't experienced that, right? This was my first job. So that then takes me to my second job, where I was just 15 years old. So it's a year later now. And I was a bagger at the local grocery store, Beaky's Food World. Now, this particular role was a bit different in that anytime I would be asked to do something, say clean the restrooms, I would do it, but then I would get praise for a job well done. And the restrooms example is a little silly to me because I didn't do anything special. I just cleaned the restroom like I would clean the bathroom at home, but they were blown away by it. So it was either that or doing taking in the bottles and cans from bottle deposits. We're in Michigan, so we're a state that has deposits on pop and drinks that are in glass or cans. So anyway, the other thing that I would do is straighten the cookie and cracker aisle, which if you've ever worked in a grocery store, that is the worst aisle to straighten and bring everything to the edge because oftentimes the boxes or the containers can be a little irregular shaped. And anyway, all that to say, if you've worked in a grocery store, you know that's the worst job ever. So I'm going to get back to talking about the praise. Now, this role was a situation that because I would get praise, I started leaning into the need for external validation. So this job really laid the foundation for my need to get external validation from the company that I work for. And so, I did also receive my first promotion here. I went from being a bagger to a grocery stocker. So I would work in produce or I'd be stocking the aisles. So again, just another example of how receiving good feedback set the tone that if I performed in a certain way, I would be promoted or recognized for that, right? And so that's where this transformation of my identity really being tied up in work came about. It was also because, work, of course, was my safe place. So at just 14 years old, I had to start providing my own toiletries like shampoo and toothpaste. So I had to work. And that continued throughout all of high school. And I oftentimes held two jobs at once because I would manipulate the labor laws. You could only go to school and work up to 40 hours a week. So it was about 16 and a half hours that you could work at a job. I would do that at one job. And then I would work a different job for another 16 and a half hours. And that continued throughout all of high school when I graduated. Now, through the years, I have received different accomplishments as my career began taking off and I was in the professional environment. So those looked like things like President's Clubs or Circle of Stars is what we called it at Manpower. I also received different organizational awards, whether it be awards for innovation and creativity, or if it was Employee of the Quarter, Employee of the Month. And then in 2021, I received the great honor of being named to Staffing Industry Analyst's 40 Under 40 list. This was an absolute dream come true, and it was something that I had wanted. I put it out in the universe, and then it happened. but it was also so public. I had zero clue how to own such a public accomplishment. So I reached out to my mentor, Kip Wright, and he reminded me that you can be humble and proud, that you are deserving, and to own it. And from that point forward, I really tried to own my accomplishments. Now, fast forward a little bit, that 40 Under 40 award created a unique opportunity for me to be interviewed by a journalist for Fast Company who was writing an article on how millennial and Gen Z women are beginning to ask for pay increases or flexibility in the workplace, things like that. That article then caught the attention of a podcaster who then invited me to speak on their podcast, Speak Your Mind Unapologetically, where we talked about being your own best advocate and taking control of your own career. This podcast episode, honestly, was both a blessing and a curse. And I say that because a blessing, it was my first podcast experience, so that was super neat. But it was also a curse because when this episode was released in January of 2023, I was nearing the height of my mental health crisis. So when it came out and I listened back to it, I didn't recognize the individual that was speaking to me. I couldn't relate to the confidence and the self-compassion that she exuded. And I just really felt like it was a complete stranger. Now, obviously, that podcast was me, but this is really where red flags started popping up around my identity and how I was so ingrained in work, and I really didn't know who I was outside of myself as a professional, which ultimately led to my mental health crisis, right? So when things at work became challenging, and not just normal challenges, right? There were circumstances that were happening. I was in such a different headspace that I needed external validation, and I didn't feel seen or heard. So because I didn't feel seen or heard at work, this felt monumental, and it felt like my world was crumbling around me, which ultimately led to suicidal thoughts and needing to get extra help and care through an outpatient partial hospitalization program in February and March of 2023. So, as I've talked about previously, the PHP or partial hospitalization program is group therapy. You do have a care team. You have a psychiatrist and a therapist. There are other clinicians that are part of your journey, and you have group classes. It's pretty cool because you get to choose your own journey related to those classes. So they would have a couple of different topics going on at the same time. And when we weren't in group session, we were able to attend one of those courses. So it was choose your own journey, if you will. Well, in one of those courses, we were talking about daily affirmations. And let me tell you, I am somebody who really, really, really wants to believe in daily affirmations. I just have a difficult time doing so. And still, I have affirmations all over my house. I have them tattooed on me just to remind me of my self-worth. And I still at times struggle with being able to believe affirmations, right? So during this class, I raised my hand and I said, okay, so let me get this straight. What you're saying is, if I repeat these affirmations, say in the mirror every single day, one day I'm going to wake up and boom, it's all just going to click and I'm going to believe it. Because what I'm used to is going to work and that being my safe place where I receive validation and recognition, and I'm not doing that right now. So I feel a little lost. She stopped me and then said something that was very profound. And it was, the moment work became your safe place, it was no longer work. So I'm going to repeat that because it's important. The moment work becomes your safe place, it is no longer work. Okay? So that was my error, right? I had been working for 20 plus years with this identity being tied to my work persona, to the point where I didn't even know, and still don't, what my hobbies are and what I like to do. But over the last year, I've been on this really amazing journey in figuring out who I am, but I'm still very much a work in progress. And to be honest, right now, I'm in the middle of another identity crisis. I just learned that my dad is not my biological father. That has really rocked my world. And I find myself in another scenario again where I'm questioning my identity. But let's get back to today's topic. So, trying new things. I get to try things like yoga and reading. I have a long list of books to read. I've been getting out in my garden, which is comforting to me. And then I try and get down on the floor with Oliver and play with him for some different body movement. But I've also, over the last year, set boundaries to protect my values and ensure proper alignment to them. So all of the things that we do, the relationships that I have, and all of that, I've called out my values and make sure that there's alignment with them. So what are the warning signs, right? So you're tying your identity to work. What are the warning signs? And before I go over a couple of those, I want to highlight a statistic. And it says that women reported higher levels of burnout at 46% than men, which reported 37% of burnout. So this is important. This is important because when your identity is tied to work, it can very quickly lead to a situation where you are now burnt out, which is the journey that I was on last year. So that really means that 1 in 2 women listening right now are impacted by burnout. So this is a topic we need to talk about. So let's talk about those signs to watch for. Are you the type of person that likes checking boxes, right? Like, I'll get to that, some type of life circumstance, after this. Or I'm not worthy unless I complete XYZ. You may be somebody who has negative self-talk or shame-based thinking, and that looks like you're not blank enough. Or who do you think you are? Which then, of course, is very closely related to imposter syndrome. And you may be somebody who feels lazy or worthless when you aren't busy, right? And so the reality of the situation, though, is that we were all born inherently loved, worthy, and enough. And it wasn't until some type of life circumstance that was really warped along the way. And so we are all valuable as ourselves, regardless of our professional identity and achievements. And again, the reality is that your self-worth is about how you think and feel, how you love and act towards others, and how you show up for yourself. It is not tied to your productivity at work, your professional identity, or any of your recognition and achievements. Those are certainly a part of who you are as a whole, but it is not what makes up your self-worth. So the next piece then would be, how do you unchain your self-worth from work and productivity, right? And I did that by focusing on my strengths and what makes me uniquely me. So the same goes for you. Focus on your strengths and what makes you uniquely you. Find joy in the things that you're good at. Practice daily gratitude and journal. Give yourself grace and self-compassion. You can also live in the moment and be present. Do an assessment and alignment of your values. Affirmations. There is science behind them that they do work for some people. And then also it's very important that you have a strong, positive support network around you that can help lift you up when you're feeling down or low. I know we have several leaders listening in, and I want to cover a couple of the elements that you can do in the workplace to become more of an effective leader. And, it's said that employees who feel their voice is heard, they are 4.6 times more likely to feel empowered to perform their best work. So leaders can do this by fostering an environment of empathy. Empathy isn't something that we spend a whole lot of time or training on when you're entering the workforce. But at the end of the day, we talked about shame earlier, and empathy is the antidote to shame. So Brené Brown, in her book Dare to Lead, puts it this way. Empathy is not connecting to an experience. It is connecting to the emotions that underpin an experience. Empathy is not connecting to an experience. It's connecting to the emotions that underpin an experience. In her book, she also talks about the 5 different essential skills for empathy, and she breaks them down into perspective taking, being non-judgmental, recognizing emotional signals from other people, so being attuned to others, practice genuine curiosity around the other person's feelings, and practicing mindfulness. However, all too often, there are misses that can occur with our interactions with our employees or those around us that we're leading. It could be a scenario where we approach a conversation with sympathy as opposed to empathy, or we come to the table with judgment and disappointment. We are discharging and we place blame. We might be minimizing or avoiding things. I'm a huge avoider. I didn't think I was, but throughout the last year, I've learned that I am somebody who stuffs emotions and avoids them, which is not recommended. Comparing or competing, speaking truth to power, or advice giving or problem solving. Now, I know I just went through those relatively quickly. One of the big parts of conversations that occur as leaders is that oftentimes we come to the table with the desire to solve a problem. And in some cases, this is not what our employees want from us. They may not want us to solve every single problem they bring to us, right? Especially when it's not work related. People bring their whole selves to work, and so we can't discard, or the old adage of, leave your problems at the door. That's just not reality. That's not how it works. So if you come to the table with a mindset of curiosity and ask, are you looking to just have me listen in this conversation, or are you looking for advice or a solution, etc.? By putting that curiosity at the forefront of your conversations and then also being curious about their emotions, it forms a deeper connection and understanding with one another. So again, creating this environment of empathy will help individuals who have a tendency to tether their self-worth to work and productivity, to show up as their full authentic selves, right? And so I'm going to go back to the topic of my identity crisis as it stands today. So last year I went through an identity crisis with work, and I am still working through that. The new information that I received a couple of weeks ago has been really difficult to process, and I have really tried to honor my body, my emotions, my feelings, all of the things to be able to work through this. I have been struggling with suicidal ideation and thoughts of self-harm. That in part is due to the fact that I feel completely numb. And that's with everything, good, bad, everything. I'm just numb. And so there's a urge almost, if you will, to self-harm so that I could feel something, even if it's pain. And I know that that is not a safe or healthy coping mechanism. So obviously I'm not doing that, but I am considering participating in an outpatient partial hospitalization program again. And I am working very closely with my therapist throughout all of this as I navigate a significant amount of uncertainty. But I want to share it because it's my reality. And you may be going through something similar, maybe not the exact same scenario, but where your identity is in question and you're finding it challenging to get through your day. I've definitely had bouts where I didn't, shower for a few days, and honestly, or even brush my teeth. But it does feel good to get myself ready and up in the morning when I'm able to. All that to say that I'm struggling, but I'm trying. And I have tools this time that I didn't have last year. I have a greater support network than I've had previously. And I have an amazing tribe of people around me that make up that network. It's really been amazing. And I am so appreciative for all of the people in my life that have helped lift me up during this time. You may be wondering what I'm doing these days to counteract the crisis that I'm in. One of the most helpful things has been writing in my journal daily, where I can just get my thoughts out and whatever comes to mind, I can get them out of my head and onto paper. And that helps kind of the looping that can occur with my thought processes. I'm also trying to get a good amount of rest, but that's been difficult. And I will be talking with my psychiatrist about my medication to see if there's something else that we can adjust. Feeling a little about that just because it can take, 6 to 8 weeks to feel the full effects. So anytime there's an adjustment to medication, it's just a long, arduous process. And open communication with those that are around me and love and support me. I think that has been something that's been hugely helpful in combating suicidal ideation and thoughts, and speaking with my therapist. I will continue to meet with her weekly as we figure all of this out. With that, I'll leave you with a quote from Brené Brown's Dare to Leave, and it's in the Learning to Rise chapter. It talks about the reckoning, the rumble, and the revolution, which I realize you probably need to read her books to be familiar with that. But anyway, it says, when we have the courage to walk into our story and own it, we get to write the ending. And when we don't own our stories of failure, setbacks, and hurt, they own us. Thank you for tuning in. Please be sure to subscribe, rate, review, and share this podcast. It's how we get the message out to help more and more individuals. Thank you so much. Take care.